Out in the middle of Siberia sits the city of Mirny. 40,000 people live here, enduring brutal winters where temperatures regularly drop to minus 50 degrees Celsius. And they tolerate this steep freeze for exactly one reason: mining diamonds. Right next to the city lies the Mir mine. It's a 1.2-kilometer-wide artificial void plunged straight into the earth. The excavation is so massive that the resulting crater is actually visible to astronauts orbiting in space. But the open pit is actually a dead zone. Operations on the surface stopped 15 years ago because the sheer walls of the crater started collapsing inward, creating a lethal hazard for any worker down below. The volcanic rock underneath is still teeming with diamonds, but the traditional method of carving out the surface had to be completely abandoned. To keep the operation running, the miners had to stop looking at the sky. Instead, they now descend a full kilometer straight down into a precarious Soviet-era labyrinth. The commute to work involves dropping down an old Soviet-era elevator shaft until you're 1,000 meters below the surface. Above ground, the air will freeze exposed skin in minutes. Down here, the temperature sits at a surprisingly comfortable 15 degrees Celsius, but that warmth comes with intense daily risks. The narrow corridors are prone to sudden fires and toxic smoke buildup. Every miner is required to carry an emergency oxygen mask that buys them exactly 50 minutes of breathable air if things go wrong. The extraction process itself is violent. Massive steel drills are driven directly into the dark volcanic rock, tearing down the diamond-bearing walls known as kimberlite. This mechanical onslaught is relentless. Every single day, the drills crush out 400 tons of kimberlite rock. Seeing these heavy machines chew through solid rock raises an obvious question. How do the delicate gems inside survive getting smashed by industrial drills? Because diamonds happen to be the strongest naturally occurring material on Earth. Miners can use extreme, indiscriminate brute force to shatter the kimberlite, confident that the indestructible gems trapped inside will remain completely unharmed. The 400 tons of rubble are hauled out of the labyrinth and brought to an industrial processing plant on the surface. Before it gets processed, a raw diamond looks like a dull, translucent crystal firmly embedded within a matrix of dark kimberlite. The massive boulders are ground down step by step until they are small, 15-centimeter chunks. Machines then scan the rubble to identify the stones carrying the highest value. Next comes the highly classified phase of the separation. The sorted rocks are plunged into a sulfurous chemical bath, a mixture kept strictly secret by the mining company. This specific liquid reacts aggressively with the volcanic material. It rapidly dissolves away the surrounding kimberlite while leaving the raw, solid diamond core entirely untouched. Extracting these gems requires heavy mechanical digging, followed by targeted chemical warfare to strip away millions of years of geology. The journey ends far away from the noisy, dirty machinery of the processing plant, inside a surprisingly quiet and unspectacular sorting room. Down here, the final cataloging is entirely manual, performed by a small team of female workers. These women earn roughly $1,000 a month for their labor, yet scattered across their desks at any given moment is $5 million worth of raw diamonds. With that much money sitting in the open, the security protocols are intense. Every single stone is meticulously weighed and cataloged before it can be transported. The stakes for the staff are incredibly high. If a single cataloged stone goes missing from a desk, the workers are held personally, financially liable for the loss. Raw diamonds vary wildly in size and clarity. Weight is measured in carats, 0.2 grams each, separated into 16 color categories. Purity dictates price. Cloudy stones fetch $10 a carat, but large, transparent gems command astronomically higher prices. Despite their massive value on the global market, these specific gems rarely cross a border. Demand inside Russia is so high that the entire supply is sold domestically. A kilometer-deep labyrinth, a massive industrial processing operation, and millions in secretive chemical extraction. All of it exists strictly to feed a self-contained national luxury market. Curious. Inside this quiet, unspectacular room, workers are meticulously sorting small, clear stones. It doesn't look like much, but the small pile of rocks sitting on this single desk is worth exactly $5 million. These stones originate in a place called Mirny, Siberia. It's an isolated, freezing city of 40,000 people that exists for the sole purpose of pulling this exact wealth out of the ground. The pristine, quiet environment of that sorting table is entirely dependent on one of the most brutal, extreme industrial operations on Earth. This is the Mir mine. It drops 525 meters down and stretches 1.2 kilometers across. It is so enormous you can actually see the hole from outer space. Up here on the surface, workers have to endure a punishing Siberian winter, where temperatures regularly plummet to minus 50 degrees Celsius. But the open pit itself is dead. The operation was shut down 15 years ago when the steep walls suddenly began to collapse, creating an acute mortal danger for anyone working in the crater. To keep the diamond wealth flowing after the surface closure, the entire operation had to be pushed deep underground. Reaching the physical limits of what could be mined from the surface didn't stop the extraction. It simply forced human workers into an invisible, much deadlier environment to maintain the supply chain. Today, the daily commute for a miner involves a 1.2-kilometer vertical drop into a labyrinth of tunnels, riding inside elevator equipment that dates back to the Soviet era. Unlike the freezing surface, the temperatures down here sit at a surprisingly warm 15 degrees Celsius, but the heat is the least of their worries. The immediate claustrophobic dangers of these narrow corridors include sudden fires and smoke, requiring every miner to carry an emergency mask with exactly 50 minutes of oxygen at all times. The legal reality of making this descent is stark. Before even entering the tunnels, workers have to sign a liability waiver, acknowledging that if anything happens to them down there, it's their own problem. The true cost of extracting these stones is the daily transfer of risk. The miners trade the freezing temperatures of the surface for immediate enclosed peril deep inside the earth. The geological target here is a rare volcanic rock called kimberlite. As you can see, the clear geometric raw diamonds are tightly embedded naturally inside this dark, rough stone, but extracting them requires staggering volume. To get a viable yield, miners have to drill, blast, and haul 400 tons of this specific rock out of the earth every single day. Above ground, massive machinery inside processing plants grinds those 400 tons of solid rock down into small 15-centimeter fragments. The final step is highly secretive. The crushed fragments are submerged in a sulfurous chemical bath. The exact mixture dissolves the kimberlite entirely, but leaves the virtually indestructible diamond completely intact. Finding a diamond in Mirny involves almost zero delicate discovery. It requires the brute force industrial destruction of hundreds of tons of earth. Back in the sorting room, we finally see the surviving stones that have been successfully pulled from the chemical baths. The evaluation here is strictly metric. The raw diamonds are categorized into 16 distinct color grades and weighed in carats. 1 carat is equal to just 0.2 grams of weight. This chart illustrates the extreme financial differences based purely on clarity. Dark stones sit at the bottom, yielding about $10 per carat, while perfectly transparent stones create an exponential spike in price. Yet the economic reality for the people handling this wealth is harsh. The women cataloging this $5 million table earn about $1,000 a month, and if a single stone goes missing, they are personally forced to compensate the company. There is a heavy irony to the Mir mine. Despite workers risking their lives in freezing pits and deep underground labyrinths to move mountains of earth, demand inside Russia is so high that these hyper-valuable stones are rarely exported. They serve as a pristine luxury product that completely masks the high-stakes, brutal human reality required to forge it. Getting a room at this hotel requires a weekend rate of $570, plus a mandatory $2,500 for a private helicopter flight just to reach the lobby. At this altitude, typical hospitality disappears. Upon landing, guests are immediately handed a legal liability waiver and grim instructions on what to do if someone falls into the water. This is Frying Pan Tower, a decommissioned United States Coast Guard facility sitting completely isolated 55 kilometers out in the Atlantic Ocean. After sitting abandoned for 3 decades, an entrepreneur named Richard purchased the rusting platform sight unseen in 2010. He recognized a market of tourists willing to pay for genuine physical peril. Guests are paying for the unmitigated reality of a decaying steel rig, an environment that inherently resists human habitation. This satellite imagery shows massive, swirling hurricane systems tracking directly across the Atlantic coast. The tower sits directly in this severe meteorological corridor, an area sailors call the graveyard of the Atlantic. Because the structure is positioned 55 kilometers offshore, professional medical rescue is heavily delayed. If a guest is severely injured, an airborne rescue team requires a minimum of 1 hour. Until help gets there, the facility relies on rudimentary DIY engineering to survive. Emergency electrical current is supplied by patched-together battery banks exposed to the corrosive ocean air. These batteries are critical. The only lifeline to the mainland is a standard marine band radio, permanently tuned to channel 16, the international distress frequency. Stripping away the safety nets of modern society turns small mishaps into major crises. The absolute isolation of the tower acts as a multiplier for every physical hazard present on the rig. Stepping onto the outer deck means standing directly beside a sheer 120-foot vertical drop to the ocean surface. The water directly beneath the structure is populated by highly aggressive, territorial bull sharks swarming the submerged pilings. The hotel enforces a strict emergency protocol for this environment. If someone falls over the railing, guests are explicitly forbidden from jumping in to save them. The only approved action is to throw down a life jacket. The biological reality waiting at the bottom of that drop ensures that a simple slip on a rusty handrail results in a near-certain fatality. The metal keeping those guests suspended above the sharks has been subjected to 30 years of total abandonment and neglect. This image displays the severe, flaking rust actively eating away at essential metal screws and structural joints. Salt water is steadily dissolving the tower's framework. The physical degradation forces strict limits on movement. The 50-year-old metal stairs are so compromised, only 2 people can use them to avoid structural collapse. Fully restoring the rig requires $3.2 million. Instead, the owner markets this decay to justify $570 weekend rates. The hotel's financial viability depends on commodifying the structure's inevitable collapse rather than actually preventing it. People paying premium rates for a weekend getaway typically expect comfort, but a thunderstorm here guarantees a wet, sleepless night under a leaky roof with water pooling inside the bedrooms. This aging marine facility is locked in a continuous war of attrition with an indifferent ocean. That explains the true purpose of the liability waiver. It is a legal mechanism to directly transfer the ultimate cost of the tower's structural decay onto the thrill-seeking guest. Extreme offshore tourism strips away the illusion of safety. Guests pay for the brief opportunity to inhabit a structure teetering on collapse, fully accepting that nature will eventually reclaim its territory.